Hello everyone and welcome to episode 73 of DoubleDM, and this one is a special one. Why? Well, because we are finally premiering the Titan's Call trailer in this episode, and on top of that, even 2 days early. Like, wow, Titan's Call is something we worked on for a very, very long time now, and to finally premiere the trailer for it is already a huge step for me, for the whole team. Because Titan's Call has been really a work of passion and love and excitement from us here at DoubleDM. Please listen into the mid-roll of this episode to get the first look at Titan's Call, our D&D 5e actual play. And if you are here on the first 2 days, Monday or Tuesday, hey, you get to listen 2 days early before everyone else. I mean, how fucking cool is that? Okay. Stopping with the gushing over Titan's Call and getting to normal show business. Today's episode talks about storytelling and story paths, and especially why TTRPG stories are so unique. There's a lot about story structure and how to think of TTRPGs as the unique medium they are. This is all accompanied by a lot of advice on how you can make that special structure useful for you as a player or as a game master or dungeon master. But now, let's dive into the episode and let's chat about making your TTRPGs better.
Hello and welcome back to episode 73 of DoubleDM podcast. With me, as usual, is my lovely co-host Emil. How are you today?
Sleepy, apparently.
All right.
I just had to yawn. I literally couldn't stop it anymore, so I had to do that. I thought maybe Niels picks up on it and just goes and continues, but no, he didn't. He just went, "Oh, how are you doing today?"
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good feeling here already. It's hot in the city.
I think it's about 30 degrees outside right now. So yeah, we're being cooked alive, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
At least I am in my.
Currently, it's 30
apartment.
degrees outside, and I think I'm gonna close the windows soon because hot air. I'm being cooked alive, but I'm still having a great time because we are here to record an episode of DoubleDM podcast.
Yeah, and by the way, do you know what helps when it's very hot outside? Taking a bath or going for a swim. And as it so happens, we both are part in a underwater campaign.
Oh, that segue was fucking great, man.
I'll try my best.
That was pretty sick. Yeah, we're both part of an underwater D&D campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's when you heard of that, just that underwater D&D campaign, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts would have been that I'm excited because I never experienced nearly anything underwater in any TTRPG.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy to be part in a underwater setting in any TTRPG setting.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first thought on it, but I was kind of part of the creation process of that idea because we talked about underwater themes and stuff on Discord, and then it segued into creating a underwater campaign. So yeah, What were your first thoughts?
So I was asked, do you want to be part of a hypothetical underwater campaign? I was like, hypothetically, I don't have the time, but yes. So now I'm part of an underwater campaign. That was the whole thought process. Okay, I don't have the time for that, but sign me up. I don't give a damn. And that's where we are. We're playing an underwater campaign, and it's not just a normal seafaring campaign. It's an underwater campaign, right? Everything happens underwater. So that obviously has a few challenges with it, right?
Yeah.
D&D isn't made for underwater, obviously. And before someone comes along, yes, we could have played another TTRPG that maybe focuses on playing underwater. Yes, and no one is saying something against that, but we decided on this system because it's the system our GM and all the players are most comfortable in, and it still kind of works for what we want to do. So that is that. Obviously, we also gonna ignore a few rules that happen underwater combat, because D&D has underwater combat as a specialty, not as the norm. And now it becomes the norm for us. So we take that specialty outside, and probably if we ever go on land, gonna apply the rules for underwater combat to us there.
Yeah,
which is gonna be very fun. But right, it's normal D&D, but underwater. So Niels, what character are you playing? If you want to tell me, because I don't know yet.
Yeah, I can tell you the rough idea, at least. Our GM created a whole society for that and awesome stuff. I am playing a warlock character whose patron is the matriarch of this society, basically. Or at least one part of that matriarchal system, which the society is based on. And he's kind of the guardian of or was a guardian of the tomb or a temple of that specific entity of that circle. So
well, it appears that but what lineage are you playing? What character?
I'm playing a merfolk, kind of mermaid-ish character.
Yeah, you just didn't mention that. That's why I asked. Well, I'm playing a Triton that basically is it kind of aligns great with what you're going for, because you are also part of a society, and the society is very important to you, to your character idea, right?
Yeah.
Because it gives you your eldritch, gives you your eldritch power, more or less. Well, my Triton, Swarm Keeper Ranger.
I love that idea so much.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, as my swarm, I have taken a lot of fish. That comes from a different dimension.
Okay.
And has come to this dimension because his society is searching for something, or more or less someone or some people that stole something from us.
Okay, yeah.
And that's where I come from, right? I also, for me, the society also plays a big part. I just wrote that society myself. Not our GM. Well, I gave my GM like 5 pages worth of notes about what I want, because we both were of the same idea that this character should be as otherworldly as possible. Everything doesn't make sense to them, and everything he does doesn't make sense to the others in the group.
Yeah.
It's complete day and night, complete difference. That might seem strange to someone that isn't part of that culture, right? As we also have cultural differences on our Earth, right? Something that is for us completely cultural normal might be something completely cultural strange to someone from Japan or Australia or Brazil, wherever you are in the world, right? There are complete cultural differences. We just created a culture that is very, very different from for everyone involved. And that's going to be a lot of fun to play, I think, because there's a lot of weird stuff that you guys are going to experience where my character doesn't know that this isn't normal. But he's basically a ranger, not just the class, but also as the military rank in his society. And has come to this world through the portal to find the people that stole these artifacts from their religion or their mythos. Right? Because they don't have a religion, they only have a mythos, where they have these artifacts that give them light against the darkness. Because one fun thing that I probably can tell you already, because as far as I know, your culture is really close to the place where my culture now lives, in your world. So I think we both will know each other probably from the start, or at least very early on. My world doesn't have any light in it.
Oh, okay.
It's complete darkness. And that's why it's so important to get these artifacts back for us.
So basically you're searching for light bulbs.
Yes.
Awesome. Fantasy light bulbs, I'm down for it.
And my fish are not, maybe look like clownfish. I had the idea of clownfish looking piranhas with anglerfish light.
Awesome. Oh my god, yes.
That is the idea I'm going for with this character.
Oh my god, yes, please.
Completely bright, vicious fish with lights attached to them.
Yeah,
because light is so important to my character.
Yeah, I love it. I fucking love it. Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to play. And I'm excited.
I cannot as well.
I'm interested to see where this is going. Anything else TTRPG related in your last week?
Yes, we recorded another session of Titan's Call, our D&D 5e actual play, where if you're listening to this episode in a few minutes, you're gonna hear the trailer for Titan's Call in our mid-roll. If it's past Wednesday, the 29th of June, it might have also already been released, or it will have already been released to social medias and Discords and everywhere, and you can listen to it basically everywhere you find DoubleDM. Yeah, but just yesterday when we were recording, I we revealed the logo, and that went really, really well. People really received your art, Niels, very, very well, and it just looks fucking great what you created with that, and I cannot wait to bring what is behind that logo to the other people as well.
Thanks. And I mean, we tweaked that logo quite a bit, and it took some time, but I think we got it where we wanted it to be. And
yeah,
it shows, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I will say might be still ways to go. Maybe it will change till we release Titan's Call. Obviously, right? We might have new ideas. There might a few things coming up, but this is the logo we're going with right now, and I enjoy it. I love it. It looks so great. I think it captures the vibe we are going for really, really well, because it is inspired by a Godzilla poster, a Godzilla movie poster. So, that's where some people might recognize it from. But it has our own touch. It has obviously our own style. It has our own title. And yeah, it just looks great.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm excited to get any more of that feedback of yours.
Yeah, we will see. I have heard people already commenting on how great this art looks in their opinion, and I cannot wait to share also the audio side of it with them.
Oh yeah, hell yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, we recorded an episode, and that was great. That recording session went really, really well, in my opinion, because we're now nearly halfway done with recording Titan's Call. So that means we're not even that far off of releasing. I talked about it on Twitter. Around September, October-ish is probably release date already, and we're in end of June. So we're not that far off, people.
Oh, yeah. I'm nervous and excited.
Yeah, stakes are raking up. Anxiety is raising like hell.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be so great. I've been enjoying recording so much. I've been enjoying listening to back to the recordings and already making a few bullet lists and punch lists. What I can edit where and searching a few sounds, getting sounds from Eli from Mayday Roleplay. Best decision ever. Right. Eli has has commissions open on her Ko-Fi page. So if you want professional podcast work for you, either in creating sound effects, planning advice and planning help, or listen throughs and advice on how to edit your podcast better, get fucking Eli for your project, because Eli sent me these sound effects. I mean, I think 3 or 4 days after I commissioned her. That was fucking quick. And they sound so fucking great. Hello? That was the fucking best thing I ever commissioned. Period. Just sounds amazing. And I think that elevates the show, where I already put in some of the sound effects we got, really, really well.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear it. I'm super excited. As you said, anxiety is building up, nervous. And the closer we get to release, the more of a nervous wreck I'll become. But yeah, that's on a whole different page.
It's too late to go back now, so we're just gonna go ahead and do it.
Exactly.
So, I don't have anything else I want to talk about in this recap, and I think we definitely want people to hear the trailer soon. So,
hell yeah.
We better stop this and leave you or go onwards to our mid-roll for episode 73. There will be a short intermission before the trailer. In the intermission, I will tell you about the trailer and blah, 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 blah. But then you will hear the trailer. And after that, we will go to the main topic of episode 73, which is story branching and storytelling. So, hear you in the mid-roll. Hear you in the extra episode. Stay tuned, people. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the mid-roll you've all been waiting for. First, let me get a few things out of the way. That is normal mid-roll business. You can follow our show on social media at DoubleDM Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can also subscribe to our YouTube now, which we've been updating and now has all our episodes uploaded and ready to go. Yes, we've been working on that backlog. You can also find clips there of the show where we upload a few clips, we have a few highlights from each episode, so you can get some of the best advice we've had in a very quick format. But yeah, that's it for your YouTube. Subscribe to that so we can get that special extra link that's not just bunch of random numbers and letters, but actually double DM. That would be fucking cool. And yeah, you're here for Titan's Call. I know, yeah, you're about to listen to the first trailer that we've been working on for, I think, 2 to 3 months now at this point. Not the show, but the trailer. We've done a lot of thinking about how we want to present the show. We've done a lot of thinking on what the trailer should convey to people, how much mystery we want in there, because this show is heavy on mystery, also cluelessness from my players, being thrown into this world and not knowing what to do and kind of left puzzling why everything around them is happening and why they are connected and all of that stuff. And we kind of wanted to convey that. So yeah, if you're into that sort of stuff, you're gonna be very happy with the trailer. Yeah, it's just it's a little bit of talk. There's a little bit of mystery in there. There might be a few clues for the show hidden in there. I'm gonna say that. That's fun. But yeah, I hope you're excited for Titan's Call. Hope you're more excited after listening to this trailer. I mean, it's been, I don't even know what to say. It's been something that I've worked on for so long now, and I'm finally so happy to share it with people now. So I don't want to talk any longer. I'm already talking for way too long for this mid-roll. So please enjoy the first trailer to Titan's Call, the D&D 5e actual play podcast by DoubleDM Studios. They found a way to do the impossible, something the citizens of Aurea have forgotten about a long time ago. They unearthed a power that once ruled the world, laid waste to every civilization, destroyed everything within their path, and then mysteriously disappeared. Now the Titans of Ruination trample the earth once more. In the middle of a town, wasted by Titan destruction, 3 unfortunate souls were brought together by the annihilation of everything they once held dear. It is now on them to uncover how they are connected to cultists, Titans, and the certain ruination of the world they call home. With most of the knowledge, secrets, and history of the world now destroyed, buried, or hidden away by its keepers and mages, they have to find the keys to a world that should have stayed locked forever. They must keep digging deeper than most have ever dared in hoping to make a difference in this world of apocalypse before everything comes to a fall. There are no second chances in a world about to be trampled flat. There's no way back to how things once were. Your past has been erased, and if you are not keen enough, fast enough, strong enough, you will meet the same end as those you left behind. Titan's Call is a D&D 5e actual play podcast by DoubleDM. Join our table to find out how our characters will traverse a beautiful yet brutal world at the brink of apocalypse, and try to uncover mysteries and secrets of ages past hidden by those with power and influence. What mysteries will be uncovered and which will stay buried and locked away for good. Find out when Titan's Call releases on all podcasting platforms and YouTube in 2022.
And with that, welcome back to the episode. Today we're talking about story branching and all that this might entail. And as per usual...
you said, I'm sorry, you said that so weirdly. I don't want to say wrong because it isn't wrong because it's a weird topic, but you said it like a story branching and everything that kind of entails, because that is a weird, ambiguous topic we're talking about today, as always.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have like these topics that are very, very well defined. And sometimes we have like random thing X. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. And so should I go again or are we just...
No. Just ask the question again. I'm sorry. Okay. I just was fascinated by looking back at different episodes we've done. So everything is fine.
Okay, because it is a very convoluted topic, or it can be a very convoluted topic at times. So let's at least try to kind of define what we're talking about as per usual. So, Emil, what are story branches?
So story branches are, if you look at a story, the points where decisions have been made, things occurred, and basically any point where you could imagine a second part of the story, right? So there's always talk about this is the darkest timeline, this is the best timeline, this is whatever, right? Basically, that timeline only occurs because that's one story branch of the story of the entire world we're in. So a story branch is just one way a story can go. And a story branch always develops when there's a decision to be made, when there is something happening where anyone can imagine a second outcome happening that kind of would diversify or change what actually happened. So you could think about this as, if you've ever seen Back to the Future, which I think everyone that's listening to this has, that's what Doc Brown also explains to Marty McFly, that this is the normal flow of time, and this is what happened when we travel in time and change the past. That's the story branch, right? You have one path, and every time something goes off of that path and changes something about existing history and story, that's a new story branch. So yeah, that's a story branch. I know that doesn't mean much to people because obviously that's clear, but also, right, it's one of these topics where it's very clear what we mean, but it actually doesn't help us to know what we mean. It isn't cut and dried. It just, okay, yeah, cool, this is a story branch. But why do I need to talk about this? Well, we're gonna get into that in this episode, so stay tuned. But generally, that is the story branch. Do you have anything to add?
No, not really. It's just a way of shaping the story you're telling, either with someone or on your own. Because you can have, or you can implement options for the listener, for the reader, or for the players to kind of experience, or in quotation marks, experience options that are hard to deliver in a linear medium like books, TV shows, or movies.
Yeah.
Because you can only focus on one of those paths.
Yeah.
Or one of those paths at a time. Yeah. Because of the linear structure of a movie or a book. Because everything that happens after some event is predetermined by the writer themselves.
Yeah. So let's talk about this linear storytelling theory, more or less. I don't know if that's actually a thing, but let's talk about it like this. So you have a story you want to tell. And if you want to tell a story, you can choose different mediums to tell it, right? You can program a video game. You can write a book. You can make a movie. You can make a TV series. You can also write a piece of music, whatever. But you have a story that you want to tell. And now you're choosing a linear storytelling medium. What does that mean, Niels?
It means that at a starting point, you or the protagonist, whatever it may be, does something that leads to another thing that they do, and so on and so forth. Everything is based on cause and action. Everything that happens is based on something that has happened before, in any way, shape, or form, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
For example, if you open a door, you cannot close it at the same time.
Yeah.
That's not how stuff works.
That's not how the world works, people. You cannot open and close the same door.
Yeah, we're not living in a quantum world.
But we can look at it through doors, I think, is a very good analogy for everything. We have a door, and we have a series of rooms. That's our story. Every room is a part of the story. And you can break that down as close or big as you want, right? You can talk about every room being a chapter. You can talk about every room being just a single sentence from the protagonist or in the book. But every room needs to be connected to one room before it and one room behind it. That's linear storytelling. And that means you have a sequence of rooms. If you have one room that is not connected to two other rooms, it either needs to be the beginning room. This is where the story starts. We do not need to know what comes before this because it isn't relevant to the story. Or it's a room that comes at the end, which means this is the ending of the story. We do not need to know what comes after this room.
Exactly.
But along this path, you always need to be connected to the other room because there's no other way you can get to the other room. And now, when you're the reader or the enjoyer, the consumer of this medium, you start in the first room and there's one door and you go through that door. That is the next situation that is presented by the book or the movie or whatever. And that is the situation you experience. After that, you only have one choice. Go forward. Theoretically, you could go back, but that is not something that changes the story. That is something that just you do to rewatch the scene, reread the book or whatever, but it doesn't change anything. You could go back, but it will not enhance your experience of the story, at least not on a basic sense. If you didn't understand the scene before it, right, you can go back and listen to it or watch it again, but that generally doesn't change the scene. There is no secret ending. There is no secret order you need to go through these rooms. You can only go forward. And every room only has one door. Now, if you look at it that way, that's fucking boring, ain't it, Niels?
Yeah, it is. But this is the challenge when you write something in a linear medium, to still make this boring structure kind of interesting.
Because, well, I would say that the structure itself seems boring, but obviously there isn't a correlation between the structure being boring and the story itself being boring.
Exactly.
Because, right, books have been around for how long fucking, right?
Yeah, they prevail through time because of a simple reason. They are still fun and engaging to read, even though this linear storytelling structure might not be the most enticing when you look at it at a paper.
Yeah, right? I think you need to look at it this way. This is a medium, and there's a reason why you enjoy that medium. If that reason is engagement of you, the linear medium might not be the best option for you because you will not be involved in the story. You will not be engaged by it. Obviously, the story can be engaging and you can desperately want to read the next page or watch the next episode. But there's a difference in engagement and an engaging story. You just, the medium might look boring, but the story isn't. If you're looking at the book in a way that you want something from it, you want that linear story from it, right? You want that linear, engaging, interesting story for you. That's why you pick up the book. If you want something where you have your own options, where you can decide the story, you will not pick up a book because you know that you're not gonna get that from a book.
Exactly.
And everyone knows that, but everyone still loves reading books. Okay, loves reading is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration for many people, but generally reading books is never gonna go out of fashion. And why? Because it's a simple way to tell a story for an author to bring their vision across. They have done that, they make that their job, or they have learned it in school or college, or they're just maybe even but hobby writers. Those are still writers, period. But those people all want to tell a story, and they know they can tell that story in a linear medium the best way. That doesn't mean their story is one-dimensional or two-dimensional. Their story is still 3, 4, 5, whatever dimensional, just that the medium they use to tell the story is straightforward and to the point.
Yeah, and I think coming back to that you said everybody loves reading books, or I think everybody at least has one linear storytelling medium that they enjoy to the fullest. Being it TV shows, movies, or books, it doesn't really matter because the story structure basically stays the same.
I'm gonna say music is also a storytelling medium.
Oh yeah, it is.
So music
Most definitely.
And music is also linear storytelling medium.
Yeah, because no matter how much you listen to a song, it doesn't change.
One fun thing for me, maybe even, I don't want to say that because I don't want to diminish the fact that art is art and is beautiful and complex, right? That's not what I'm saying, but a piece of art, and since Niels is an artist, I might say something that completely offends him.
We'll see.
When you draw a piece of art or create a piece of art, right? A digital artwork or painting or whatever, that's even less of a complex medium than a book. Not on a scale that doesn't tell a story. Just that the book has a timeline to it. And the painting obviously doesn't have a timeline shown because it's a one flat image.
Yeah, and I can see where this is coming from. The completed image that you as an artist draw is a, in quotation marks, flat, one-dimensional medium, more or less.
Yeah.
But the process of creating that might not be, or is that most definitely.
Yeah, but no one has seen the process of how the Mona Lisa was drawn.
Exactly. They just see the Mona Lisa and might enjoy that.
You could still argue that the Mona Lisa is a storytelling device.
Yeah, definitely.
Or whatever other piece of Van Gogh, Picasso, and how they are all named. Yeah. Right? All of these artists, they tell stories through their paintings. They paint images, they paint stories. But you only see the completed image as a consumer of their art. So it's less dimensional because it doesn't have that added dimension of an extended time that it doesn't have an extended dimension of development, at least for the consumer. For the artist, it's there. And again, I do not want to diminish the fact that artists are incredible people and incredibly talented in what they do. And right, this doesn't mean that they are less of a medium to enjoy. It just means that they are a different way to enjoy the medium.
Exactly. And a whole art piece can tell a beautiful story. But no matter how long you look at the picture, the story doesn't change. In regards to a book where the more you read, the more the story changes, even though it is a linear story.
Yeah.
Coming back to the room example, maybe would be a story or a book would be a consecutive following of rooms, a sequence, and a painting might just be one room.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it doesn't tell a story. Not just not to that degree that a book might do.
Okay, so here comes my analogy. Every form of storytelling is a building. A single room is a building. That is an art piece. It's one-dimensional. It has one room. There isn't anything else from that room. It's the starting and end point. Period. The second form is a series of rooms, consecutive series, one after the other, always one after the other. That's also a building, just that it's several rooms. And now we come to the next. Now we talked about 1 and 2 dimensional. Now let's talk about 3 dimensional. Stories that have multiple paths. Niels, talk me, what is multiple path stories?
It gets confusing as fuck now.
Now it becomes harder to envision, but it gets even harder if we talk about TTRPGs. Wait a bit for that, people.
Exactly. Well, basically, a 3-dimensional structure would be that not one of the middle rooms of a sequence might not be connected to just 2 other rooms, the one before and the one after, but might be connected to 3, 4, or X number of rooms. Because now you have not just one door that you can go through, but 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. And they all lead to different rooms with a different number or set number of doors that again lead to different rooms with different numbers of doors.
Yeah.
And then we have the classic branch thing.
That's where the branches come in. That's where the topic of today's episode comes in. But we're not going to stop there. I want to break this down a bit. First, let's talk about a very easy way to envision multiple path stories. And that is a binary story. I call it binary story. You have a starting point, and you always, per room, have one decision to make between 1 or 2 doors, left or right. You can envision this as if your players are walking down a path in the woods, and they always have to choose between left or right. Left, we go into the cave. Right, we go into the mountains. Left, we go to the waterfall in the cave, or we go to the monster in the cave. That is always a binary story. And right, that's a very easy way to envision non-linear storytelling.
Yeah.
Always have a decision to make between 2 options. That's the most easy basic form that one can imagine. Now, obviously, we can expand on that. Rooms can have different number of decisions from 0 to infinity.
Yeah.
But obviously for these multipath story mediums, the options cannot be infinity, because if they are infinity, you cannot create infinite next branches after that one room you're in.
Exactly.
Right? We're not talking about TTRPGs yet, because in TTRPGs you have infinity number of doors per room. But we're gonna go from there. We'll have one starting point, and then you have a number of options to go. Per room, that stays true. You have a number of options to go until you enter a room where there aren't any options anymore. And mind you, to make it more complex even, you might have a story branch that only takes 3 rooms and one that takes 15 rooms. Both end in a different room, both end a story, and the story is over, but one of them only took 2 decisions and the other took 14 decisions. Both are a complete story, as we talked about in the linear path, right? If you look at each branch individually, till there are no rooms left with unanswered doors, basically, then you have a complete tree of story. And if every branch is a linear story again.
Yeah, this might be difficult to achieve in classical media, in books, movies, or TVs, or it might not just might be difficult, but it's near impossible to do.
It's basically impossible, right? You can create choose your own adventure books, TV series, or whatever, right? One thing that has been happening recently is Markiplier in space. If you've ever heard of that, people, that is basically a form of multipath storytelling. And I think it's also always binary storytelling, to going to back to our simple example, because, right, you have a 3 to 4 minute video of Markiplier doing anything before the camera, and then you choose one of 2 options options what to do next. That changes the story. And exactly that is multi-path storytelling. Just that Markiplier has binary path storytelling. If he had 3 options in one video, that automatically makes it a multi-path storytelling.
Yeah, and I think the best medium that lends itself towards multi-path stories would be video games, because you can encode multiple paths without having that much added weight of for example, 17 different story ending choose your own adventure book, because that thing would just be massive.
Yeah.
But the video game itself, the data size might be bigger, but obviously it's not heavier but that's a different thing.
Right, it's a different thing. Obviously, the data is compressed and whatever, and it's incomprehensible to people how much a gigabyte actually is, but we don't talk about that. Because if I would first of all go on for 10 minutes, and second of all, people would tune out. But yeah, I think video games lend itself really, like you said, because, right, look at every story video game you've played. And I'm talking about these Detroit Become Human, the
classic
Two Souls.
The Telltale game series are a perfect example for that.
Heavy Rain, talking about more classics. Those games, all of those games, and everything that is like it, are exactly these games. You make decisions as the player that change the diverging story path of this scene or game completely, right? When Detroit Become Human came out, there was this first scene with, I think his name was Connor. Yeah, his name was Connor. The police android that had to convince someone that was on top of a building from, I think, shooting a little kid and then shooting himself or killing himself by jumping.
Yeah.
And you had to make decisions, right? You were looking around the scene, you were finding clues and all of that stuff, and then you had to do that talk. And every option you took in that talk changed the outcome, or mostly changed the outcome of the scene. The best case scenario, you save the girl and the android that has become defiant. Worst case, both of them don't make it out.
Yeah.
And those are both outcomes. And then there are outcomes of you save the girl, but don't him, you don't do that, you get shot or whatever. There are a lot of different outcomes.
And I think this scene or scenes like this are a good example that not every decision has to lead to a completely different ending, because some decisions might take a different path to a similar or the same or at least a similar outcome.
Yeah.
Just through a different way.
Yeah, I think now we're getting into a graph theory. If anyone that is listening has had either a computer science degree or a math degree or a physics degree as well, you probably have heard of graph theory. And right, we're talking about trees so far. And trees are data structures that have one beginning, a root, and then blocks beneath it that are connected to the root. And then you have a layer of let's say 5 blocks that are connected to the root. Those are the 5 rooms you can go from the starting point. So you have a decision to make with 5 outcomes. And then for each room, they have children. That's what they're called, graph theory. Each has 3 more children. So each room has a decision to make for you, where you can make a decision with 3 outcomes. And then these 15 rooms each have 2. That makes it 30 rooms. And these 30 rooms are all the ending of the story, each different endings. So you have 30 endings to a story. That is a very easy graph to understand. Now, what Niels brought up is, well, you can connect 2 different children you can connect 2 different rooms to 1 children again. That, by definition, doesn't make it a tree anymore, but a graph. And this is a perfect way to talk about graph theory a bit. I know this might bore people, but think about it with stories. Try to envision this, what I'm talking about, with a story. And so you have a starting point. That is always true. You always need a point you're looking at the beginning. That is your starting point. And that is the only thing that's always true, right? Some graphs do not have a defined starting point necessarily, but when you look at the graph, there's still one point you have to choose in the beginning. When you analyze the graph in some way, shape, or form, one point is the beginning. If you look at a tree, the root is always the beginning of your story. That's where your story starts. And then everything that is connected to that room is where you can go, right?
Exactly.
And then you're in a new starting room. Obviously, that room isn't the beginning of your story anymore, but that is the new room you look at right now. And that room has a few other options you can go. Theoretically, in graph theory, you can go back to the starting room you were in before. And that is something that in storytelling doesn't happen, because that point is clear cut and done. There isn't anything to do with that room anymore, because the situation that is presented in the room in the story is done for. So yeah, you can only go forward. You cannot go back, basically.
Yeah.
And as soon as you land in a spot, in a point in the graph where there are no ways to go anymore because every option has been taken, that is the ending of your story.
Mm-hmm.
That's the ending of the graph. You cannot analyze the graph any further because you met a dead end. You cannot go back, as we talked about right now. And basically, that's how a story works. You have a starting point, draw yourself a few circles on a piece of paper. Let's say 7 circles. Draw yourself 7 circles on a piece of paper. I'm gonna wait a few seconds. Now, draw a few lines between those circles. Any way you want. Just means each line needs to be connected from one point, from one circle to another. That's the only rule you have. Now you have 7 circles and a lot of lines. Or maybe a few lines. I don't know. I don't know what your paper looks like. Put one of these circles as your starting point. That's where you start. And now you know all the lines you can go from there, right? Those are the ways you can go. Now go one of these lines. You're in a new circle. And you have deleted one of the lines, basically.
Yeah.
Because that's the line you went. And then you do the same again. And at some point, you're not gonna be able to go a line more. And that's where it ends. And that is how non-linear storytelling in a graph more or less works.
Yeah.
You have a starting point, and at some point there is no way to go anymore, so that has to be your ending. And that is how you can imagine non-linear storytelling.
Yeah, and I think
on a basic level.
And I think Detroit Become Human has made that a part of the game itself.
They made it...
Or at least partially. And after you finished one mission, in quotation marks, you see a branch system.
Yeah, but that's tree.
Yeah, it's kind of in that direction, but not to that extent.
Yeah, again, that's the pedantic. I know what that actual structure is called like in science. So yeah. If Detroit Become Human makes it very clear to you that this is the story path you took. Look at it, how many other options you could have taken.
And then we get to TTRPGs, where you don't have a set number of doors or a set number of paths you can take from one room.
Yeah.
But an infinite open room, basically.
Yeah, you don't even have a room anymore. You have an open field. This is very fun because I don't know if that actually is an existing thing also in data science, but the idea of an infinite graph is something data science doesn't like because you cannot analyze an infinite graph, at least not to completion, because it's infinite per definition.
Yeah.
But an infinite room, even, or an infinite point itself is the thing you're looking at right now. You have a starting point. That's the same again. One circle on your paper. But you do not know which other lines there even are or other circles there are on this piece of paper. Basically, if you've played the video game, your render distance is so low that you do not see the other points in the story. You only see the point you're in right now. And then your players go a certain direction in the story. They make a certain decision that leads them to something. And then you discover that option they took and the new situation that is opened up by it.
Yeah.
And you now know the starting point. The starting point has been set, and you now know the new point, and you know the path you took. But there are 1,000 paths, millions, infinite paths you never explored.
Exactly. And that's why it's difficult to define it in a TTRPG sense, what we are talking about. And this is another reason why you don't have to worry about creating story branches while you're playing TTRPGs, because it just happens naturally if you give your players agency and have their actions have meaningful consequences, or even not that meaningful consequences. As long as something happens because of the actions your players took, you already have a branching story.
Yeah, completely correct. So for TTRPGs, it's impossible to look at a story systematically, at least to some extent. You can still apply the systems we talked about in this graph theory and branching stories and stuff, because you know your players are going to have to make decisions at points, preferably at all points in the story, because that's how it works. And at each point, the decision they make will influence the next decision they will make, because it led to that decision on a simplified level, at least. Obviously, it can be that one decision has to be made regardless of what decisions led to that, but that decision still has to happen and all of that stuff. But that's why TTRPG stories are so complex and nearly unexplainable, right? If you've ever told someone about your stories from your TTRPG sessions and they look at you confused, yeah, that's gonna happen. Just simply not because TTRPGs are a wild concept to people, because you only explain the story to them, but just because there is no rhyme or reason necessarily to much of the story, because the decisions are endless, right?
Yeah.
Writing down a TTRPG story in a book is not gonna make for a good book necessarily, at least not with a lot of work from that author themselves. When they're gonna have to made a lot of explanations, a lot of decisions have to be made more precise and all of that stuff to make sense to an outside spectator.
Yeah.
But TTRPGs, again, are infinite stories, more or less, that have infinite branches where you discover the branches one after the other. Sometimes decisions might be very cookie-cutter clear. Do you take the left or right path? And yes, your players might take the left or right path, but they have the option to say, we go back.
Mm-hmm.
They have the option to say, we go, if you're in the woods, and your players have A or B, left or right, or backwards, C. They can also choose D and just walk into the woods. Left or right into the woods. Those alone, we already have 5 options with a decision that was actually only between 2 options. Because players have the agency, word, very important keyword, to do that.
Yeah, especially in the woods example, I had that in a recent game of mine where they wanted to explore the woods for some weird or dangerous monsters or beasts or whatever that may be of a dangerous nature to the city they are living in right now. And I just prepared something that was somewhere around in the woods. or could be in the woods. But I didn't prepare exactly where it was because then this prep may have been wasted because I didn't know where my players wanted to go. They just said to me, yeah, we want to look through the woods. And then I said, okay, sure. Those things could be theoretically in the woods. Where do you want to go? And then they just basically spun around in a circle, stopped at a random time and went in a straight direction. And that's something you cannot plan for. And that's something you shouldn't plan for because that's not possible. And so you created a diverging path or a branching path because they took that direction and not any of the other directions they could have taken.
Yeah, and one of the most important parts is, might say, well, I can plan for that if I just move the challenges when they go a certain direction through that method they chose by just walking around in a circle and then stopping and going one direction, could, in quotation marks, prepare for that by creating a challenge and putting it wherever your players go. But we talked about that in extent already in several other episodes, that yes, you can do that, and your players probably won't notice, but it also might not be the best way to tell the story, because their decision to decide which way they were going has been meaningless. You could have let that out and just told your players, okay, you go into the woods, you go a random direction, and this is what happens. Then you would have taken that decision away from them. Yes, but that decision itself didn't mean anything in the first place if you do it like that. So yeah, you have to pull with the punches. I think we said that so many times. I think everyone says that if they've had at least some TTRPG experience, you have to pull with the punches. So the question becomes, Niels, how do you even write a TTRPG story if you cannot prepare it?
Most of the time you don't. You just can't write a TTRPG story because of the multitude of options your players can take. The infinite number of paths they are all lead to a different story.
Yeah.
And these stories cannot be written down or prepared in a way that you expect from the classical mediums, like movies, TV shows, books, video games, etc.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the beauty of TTRPGs, but also the challenge in some of the TTRPG parts.
Yeah, it's the eternal challenge of how do you, as a game master, dungeon master, or whatever, make a story or create, not make a story, but create something that engages your players, but doesn't take away from the core emphasis on engagement and investment and participation and collaboration, basically.
Yeah.
The first and most easy thing to do is creating the world, the playground, more or less, as you could call it. NPCs, villains, monsters, locations. And yes, in that instance, you can also create plots. Not in the way that event happens, but in the decision of these two kingdoms are at war. That itself is a plot, but that plot hasn't been defined by a series of events. You just say that there is a series of events that is a war.
Yeah.
That series of events, however, hasn't been defined. So if your players start engaging with that war, they should have an impact on that series of events. Or more or less, the series of events comes with them. You then have, your players, there is a war between two kingdoms. This is the war. Your players enter at a certain stage of this war. That could be, it just broke out. The people haven't even clashed yet, but everyone knows it's coming. And your players are there, no, we want to stop that. That's where you enter. So the event is the war has started. They haven't started killing each other yet.
Yeah.
And that is where your players enter. And that is where your players are in that situation and now decide what the next situation is going to be through their actions. If they say, okay, we need to talk to both leaders of these countries or to representatives of these countries, that this war is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So we go to both sides and talk to them, right? That's basic. That's easy to understand, but that's something. Now you have events. You have more events. Your players gave you what they want to do. They gave you the next situations. Generally, the next situation is your players gonna go to Queen A and King B and talk to both of them. Those are the next situations, right? There might be several situations in between that, but generally that's the next situation that comes after this. This is the path they want to take. Now, along that path, again, there can be a lot of different ways to get to the queen, for example. They could go through advisors and earn trust. They could just barge into the castle and say, we know we can stop this war. Please let us. Or they can, I don't know, find the other ways to talk to them.
Yeah, there are, as per usual in TTRPGs, an infinite number of ways they can deal with a given situation. But what you have to prepare, basically, is, or what you have to write if you want to write or create a TTRPG story, is a living world that reacts to the players and the other way around as well.
Yeah.
Impacts on each other. The player characters impact the world, and the world impacts the player characters.
Yeah.
Because the world basically prompts the characters to do stuff, and the characters do choose which prompt to choose or what they want to do, even if there isn't a prompt per se.
Yeah, right? It gets confusing because of the unfathomable scale of TTRPG stories and worlds and ideas and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it always works with infinite, with the infinity and complete free will and whatnot. But yeah, a living, breathing world is a big factor in that, in writing a story, in writing a story branch, right? Because if you have a living, breathing world, you have a lot of NPCs, you have a lot of entities, you have a lot of everything, and that all creates these story branches with your players in exchange, right? Your players interact, the world interacts, the players react, the world reacts, and all of that stuff. That will create those infinite branches for you. You just have to be good enough to recognize them and then seize them. That is hard. I'm not gonna lie. But again, you can do it, as with everything in TTRPGs, as is the core essence of this podcast as a whole. You can do it. Trust us, you just have to do it. If your players say, we want to go to the Dragon's Lair to speak to the dragon, your next event is gonna be your players on the path to the dragon, and at some point there's an event where the players are talking to the dragon. And then you have to seize that opportunity. If your players are there to talk to the dragon, you have to keep in mind that your players are probably gonna talk. Even if that dragon wants to fight in the beginning, your players are probably not gonna try to kill it instantly. They're gonna talk. They're gonna try to talk. You have to be open to that possibility.
Yeah.
And you cannot prepare a dragon. If your players randomly meet a dragon, yes, it's completely fine that you're not that prepared for your players to talk to it or fight it even. Maybe you want them to run away. You can make your will heard for your players, but then you need to make it through the living world.
Exactly.
You have to tell your players through the world around them that that dragon is not to be fought or talked to by them. They ignore those signs and their decision is to still talk to the dragon, but the dragon doesn't want to talk. Then that leads to a fight. That is then the new story branch that opened up because your players made the decision to talk to the dragon that doesn't want to talk to them. But that only works if both sides know what the other side wants to do, or not even know, but have the option to know.
Yeah.
Okay, I think while we're at the living, breathing world thing, I think talking about time is an essential part.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Time affects all stories. That's why we said in the beginning a painting is a one-dimensional story, because time isn't part of it. A linear story also has time, but it has only one linear progression, the direction forward. A multipath story also has only progression forward. You cannot go back and then choose a new path.
Yeah.
You have to start at the beginning again.
Yeah. And even with time traveling stuff where you go back in time, in world, but the story itself isn't going backward.
Yeah.
But just in one direction, as always.
Yeah.
Just keeping it going forward, even though the in-game time might change through time travel or whatever.
Yeah.
The story time itself doesn't.
Yeah, story always works along time. And that even is true for TTRPGs.
Yeah.
TTRPGs work with time. And time is an essential factor of everything. I'm not talking about limiting time in your campaign world because your players only have a certain number of days to get to somewhere, or the quest fails and everything is doomed or whatever. You can do that, yes, but that's not what I'm talking about here. We're talking about if your players make a decision, for example, they're in a tube and they decide to leave and they come back later. Change has happened. Maybe they cleared out nearly all of the dungeon and a different adventuring group came in and stole their treasure.
Yeah.
That is something that happens because of time. Because time elapsed while your players weren't there. Because the world you're in has time. It never stops. It is living and breathing, right? It lives on, even if your players are gone. Your players' actions cause ripple effects that might still be there if they are not around anymore. And the same goes for the world. If something happens in the world, you have this event, a dragon attacked the village 2 years ago, and your players enter that village, they might still feel the effects of that dragon attack.
Oh yeah, and I think what the living, breathing world and the time combined can lead to in TTRPGs is the following of two paths at the same time, story-wise.
Now it gets freaky.
Exactly, because obviously the time in your in-game world matters and moves forward. But in that time, for that path they chose, there's nothing active to do at the time, but they still follow that path even though it is a passive thing, more or less. And while this is happening, they can pursue other things they want to accomplish. Yeah. And there you're splitting the path, leading kind of to a similar outcome, or at least to a central node again, where then the paths can split up again and maybe even diverge again and combine again. It is completely weird to talk about this in a conceptual way, but basically creating side plots while still following the main plotline.
Yeah, right. It's the main plotline can be on hold, right? Your players want to talk to the queen, and the advisor told you she will see you in 3 days. Then the next room your players are in is waiting for 3 days. They can do something in those 3 days, and that is theoretically following both paths. Obviously, that's one of the easier ways to talk about it, but there are could also be that both things are working at the same time. For example, one other example is my players. Currently, my Phantoms of Chaos game are in the high north trying to find a snake temple, and that is the story path they're going. That's the main story path they are going, right? We can talk about side plots, side quests, and a side quest, more or less, is one of the players has told me in person they would love to do an actual monster hunt with their character. Well, guess what? There is a fear of a big monster in the area. They need to go to the area anyway, so why not combine the two? There's a monster in the area they are gonna go through. There's a temple in that area they're gonna go through. They're not necessarily connected at all, but my players are gonna be in that area and searching and walking, hex crawling. I'm gonna try that for the first time. Yeah, and that's there's a monster. That monster is moving about, has a home, and all of that stuff. The temple is there, and the temple isn't moving at all, or whatever. And my players are gonna go through that wasteland. And very simply put, they can do both.
Yeah,
and even do both at the same time. If they pass it correctly, that monster might be at the same time at the temple as they arrive. They find the temple and have to kill the monster. Or they can also choose to just do one of the two things, just go for the temple, or even just go for the monster hunt and go back again. And then after that, go to the temple.
Yeah.
But they can do it at the same time.
Yeah, I've done something similar to with one of my groups where I created some magic items, each for one for each, that evolves with them, basically. And they all have a subplot. Every item has a subplot that not necessarily needs to be followed, but in order for it to evolve, there are certain stages or certain things that need to be achieved. And these things can be followed while still following the main plot at the same time, because they can research on the main plot while still researching on the item or whatever. And that is something that I try to weave in the character backstory to create maybe a whole new set of subplots to follow at the same time. But yeah, that might get too complicated.
I think player backstories, player wishes, player ideas are the best way to do paths at the same time, parallel.
Exactly.
Because my player told me, I want to do that. You said you want to include player backstory while still advancing the main. And the player story is its own subplot, more or less, of that big plot you're experiencing right now, right? When we're talking about plots in TTRPGs, we're not talking about creating them, we're talking about experiencing them, which is a completely different thing. One other thing I wanted to talk about is setting up future things. You can, right, we talked about foreshadowing, seeding in, plot twists, and all of that stuff, but connecting that to this is when you're in a room, in one of the story rooms, and you're at a certain decision point, and your players make a decision. They will make the decision based on all the knowledge they have had before. Expectedly, at least. Obviously, players will forget, blah, 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 but expected they make that decision with all the knowledge they've learned from all the other story situations they had before. Now, very fun is the setup. Basically, you give your players information at some point that doesn't mean a whole lot for the current decision they're at, or the next, but it means at some point for a decision they're gonna make. Now, that sounds like you force that decision on your players because you seed it in hints early on that only work for a decision. And what if your players never take the path to that decision? Then that decision may never come, right? So, and we talked about not forcing decisions on your players if that decision doesn't make sense in the current story branch you're in.
Exactly.
How do you work that together, kind of?
Well, it is difficult, I think.
Yeah.
Without blatantly forcing your players to take a specific route, but still kind of seeding the desire to want that is through, as you said, hints that relate to some way or in some way to your players.
Yeah.
That they kind of grow attached to the idea of following that hint. And then when it comes to the decision, you haven't forced them, but you have seeded the desire to follow it on their own. Basically, you inceptioned them into wanting to go that path.
Yeah, but right, we don't want to inception them because that's pushing an idea on them. I think what you talked about is still kind of true, but we just don't want them to be forced a direction.
Exactly. It's more or less giving you the idea that may grow or may not grow into the desire to want that.
Yeah, we see it in a hint, and it's their option to either choose to pursue, let that hint grow, or ignore that hint entirely.
Yeah.
That might be a situation that they make not actively, but passive, but that's okay. Oftentimes, those things aren't plot holes. Those things are just parts of the story that haven't been picked up, right? That's one of the things that happens in these infinite stories. There are infinite directions you can go, right? If your players run around in a circle and then stop and go one direction, to break it down, a circle is 360 degrees. They went one of those 60 degrees, basically. The other 390 and 359 options have not been taken. Your players could say, and you might have hints to those directions, right? You might have things that my players might have seen in one direction a blue flower, while the others are only all yellow. Whatever, right? That is a hint that isn't necessarily forcing them in any direction, but it hints to a future decision or a future situation that might still happen. Yeah. Maybe your players ignore that and you can put that decision later on again, right? If your players are in a forest where there's just a few flowers are blue, that doesn't mean that there's only one flower that is blue. They could encounter a blue flower again without you having to force the same blue flower on your players. But right? There is the setup. You can present information to your players that they get back to or encounter in the future again. Or setups, right? When you're talking about villains, for example, that's one of the best ways to do. Villains are reoccurring NPCs. And those are NPCs that are allowed to force themselves on players. Yeah. Because while we always say you're never allowed to force something on your players, you're actually allowed to, right? That's the fun thing about it. You're allowed to force stuff on your players. The villain has their own ways to act. Major NPCs should probably have their own ways to act, and that might force something on your players. You're just not allowed to make it look like you force your players along one path. But there are points in the story where you can basically drive a wall in the direction your players are going and say, no, new situation arises, in the tall grass, Pokemon attacks you.
Yeah, it all comes back to the living and breathing world part, because the world itself moves even though the players aren't present. Yeah. The villain still does their thing, even if the players don't know about the villain yet. Yeah. And so obviously these actions will influence the players. Yeah. And then the world with the changed things will prompt the players to do something, whatever it may be.
Yeah. When you want to write a TTRPG story, it all comes down to not creating a plot, right? You not want to create a sequence of events. You want to create those single events and only the events your players are at right now. Right? That sometimes feels like, right? Often when you ask people how do they prepare their story, they prepare the event that is imminent at the beginning of the session, because that event happens nonetheless, no matter what happens. Yeah. Just the beginning. And after that, you only need preliminary information about about things your players are in, what they want to do, what they can do, what they might do, and all of that stuff. And then you only need a few bullet points everywhere, in every direction, that you can put everything together yourselves.
Yeah.
So that's how you write a TTRPG story, to answer that question. Generally, write a living, breathing world that might sound dangerous, but take it in steps again, right? The situation your players are in right now is the most imminent. That's the one you should focus on. And after that, you look at what might happen, what can happen, what might never happen, and just everything around it, revolving around it.
Exactly.
Just write down a few bullet points in every direction you can think of. And even if your players take a direction you didn't think of, you can make that stuff up. Either with the bullet points you have, by taking something from everywhere, or making up new on the fly because you look at your bullet points and the way your players chose that direction to make up what happens. Easy peasy. You can do it.
Yeah, and I think that basically sums it up perfectly, at least for my way of preparing TTRPG stories. And I think it's a very organic way to do it because it factors in greatly the player agency and it keeps you on your toes and helps you improvise. Or it forces you personally to improvise a lot more and therefore get better with it or at it. So basically a win-win situation. You kind of leave your comfort zone a bit, but just not far enough to completely make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you learn it and then get more comfortable with it and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think that's about it for today, right?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
And I think with that, as per usual, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DoubleDMPod, or you can visit our website at www.doubledm.com. And we also have a Ko-Fi if you want to check that out. And what really helps the show out is please leave a rating, review, or whatever on one of your favorite podcasting listening platforms. And with that, thanks for listening and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, people.